Hi class, this is your Professor Joseph. Today we're going to be reviewing Chapter 2 from your Hurley Introduction to Logic. So a lot of you are using MindTap, whether you're using the book, MindTap, depending on what class you're in, whether it's online, in person, this works the same. I'll be using a mock exam. I will go over questions. You can, at home or in class or whatever, however you're watching this, pause it, try to answer it for yourself, and then we'll move on. If you struggle with any one of these, go back to this section in the book, figure out what you missed, and work on that. So pretty much this covers 2.1 through 2.5. Here we go. So to start, this is, if you're using MindTap or if you're in my class in person, in the book, in the very back of Chapter 2, in other words, right before Chapter 3 starts, scroll up, and you're going to get in each chapter. Hurley does this pretty well. He'll give you a summary of everything you learn in the chapter. So you might, when you're reviewing with me, doing this mock exam, you might have this open and or print it out on a separate piece of paper and write notes. Like if you struggle with vagueness versus ambiguity, you might want to check that off. Or each section, if you do well, put a check. If you don't do well in a particular part of that section, put a minus sign. However, you can be helped with your own review process. But here we go. So now we'll go to the mock exam. Once again, this is not your test. This is just a review. This is a sample. These are various questions. I have about, 6 or 7 tests full of, 30 to 40 questions each test. And that's outside of you using MindTap. Okay, so your MindTap format might be a little different than what you see here. That's fine. This is just a review of the concepts that you're going to be tested on. So let's try number 1. Which of the following words or group of words is not a term? So for this one, you have to figure out, what a term is. That's back in section 2.1. And by the way, for the first few of these, I'll go real slow with training wheels, and then I'm just going to go fast, okay? So in other words, I'm not going to cover all this from the book, but let's say you struggled. You don't know where this was at. You can easily go up here. So we're going to go to 2.1. Okay. And we're looking for what a term is. And once again, if you're using MindTap, you can follow along here. Let's see. I wonder if I skipped it. I know what a term is, but I'm acting as if I'm you, confused and not knowing what a term is. So I'm trying to play along or make believe as if I'm a student who's confused about that. And I thought he was going to give me a bold example, but he doesn't. So basically, a term's the main subject of a sentence. I'm going to laugh if it's in. I'm going to laugh if it's in 2.2 because I was assuming 2.1. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So I was assuming that when this mock test, the very first question would start at 2.1. So it starts at 2.2. Okay. So to make a long story short, term. Any word arrangement of words that may serve as the subject of the statements, the main subject of the statement. So it could be proper names, common names, or descriptive phrases. Those are all terms. What they are not is adjectives, adverbs, verb phrases, okay, like runs quickly, moreover, craves, all this stuff. These are not terms. So my main point in this is just if you were confused, you go back to 2.2, you look up what a term is, boom. So we go over here. Which of the following words or group of words is not a term? Which one? Not a term. You can push pause, figure this out. And the answer is ding dong, B, easily readable. So all the rest are terms because they're proper names, common names, or descriptive phrases. Go back to that section in 2.1. And easily readable, that's not the main subject of a sentence. Yeah. Reading is a verb, so easily readable is an adverb describing the verb. So we know that that's not a term. So let's move on to 2. Words or statements that have cognitive meaning. Select the best answer. What does a statement that has cognitive meaning do? It's the main function. Push pause if you want to think about this. And the answer is A, conveys information. So if you struggled, and I believe this is where Hurley does the reverse, this is section 2.1. This is where I was going in the very beginning. So in 2.1, cognitive meaning conveys information. See it right there? So that's your answer. So we have cognitive, emotive, and value claims. We'll see a couple of those, coming here. So conveys information. All right, number 3, the primary danger of emotively charged words is that they, and again, you can look at 2.1 where I just was, because we have emotive value claims, and then we have the cognitive statements that we were just in. So now we're in emotively charged words. They, D, prompt us to lead to unjustified conclusions. Okay. If somebody uses an emotively charged word, that's like, hey, you a-hole, or something like that, or you ignorant fool, or something like that. It can elicit an emotive response from you, but it might not necessarily lead to a logical conclusion. So that's what it means when it says prompt us to unjustified conclusions. If somebody can get you to emotionally react, it might be game over for you. You might get forced into the conclusion that they wanted you to buy all along, even though it's not logical. By the way, this happens in political debate all the time. If you can piss off or anger your opponent, you might be able to get them off their rocker and say something or lead them into a conclusion that they don't believe is sound. But anyways, if you were this person that uses emotively charged words all the time, maybe you should not use them as much. If you want to get a clear conclusion across to somebody, you don't need emotion to do it. You need fact and reason. But you can use emotion, and you can read in the chapter why Hurley tells you to avoid this as far as terms of logical progression. But anyways, D4. And I believe this is in 2.1 as well. Words such as excessive, fresh, normal, and I think I'll even use, and Hurley uses, cold, rich, poor. Those are all vague. It means that you don't exactly know what you mean by cold or rich or poor or normal. You have to give more information to define it. So it's vague. It means we don't know whether that word applies or not. Let's use cold for example. It's cold in here. Well, somebody will be like, yeah, it is cold. And then somebody else may be like, I'm not even sure what you mean by cold. Is it like 60? Is it like 20? Is it like negative 40? So that person's asking for more precise information to eliminate vagueness. And until you eliminate vagueness, you don't know what excessive, fresh, normal, rich, poor, cold, you don't know what they mean. So look back at 2.1. You struggle with that. 5, a claim that something is good, bad, right, or wrong is value. If you want to know more about value claims, good, bad, right, and wrong, usually we see Right and wrong referred to as actions, and then good and bad referred to as character of persons, good and bad people, instead of right or wrong people. But sometimes these words can be used interchangeably. But if you wanted to take an ethics class here at Mount SAC or any other college, it is an awesome class. I highly suggest everybody take one. So there you go. Those are value claims. And the answer to that was E. 6, the newspaper headline, Farmer Bill dies in house, is primarily. So this one, if you struggle with this, it's ambiguous. And what it means is ambiguity, and you can look back to this section, at least 2 different possible explanations could be given. Now, to see this, at least 2 things. Farmer Bill, is that the name of a bill that dies in the House of Representatives? Meaning, is it referring to information contained in a bill? Or is there literally a guy named Bill who is a farmer who dies in a house? You can see this 2 different ways, and you don't know which way the author's referring, so it's ambiguous. At least 2 possible meanings. In order to see this really well, and I do this with a lot of students, if you've never seen this before, this is amazing stuff. The Gestalt shift. So let me do this. So look at this image right here. It's kind of hard. This one right here. And you tell me, how many of you see a rabbit? Okay. How many of you see a duck? It's quite fascinating. So you can see a rabbit and you can see a duck, but it seems like your mind is aware of one of those at a time and not both at the exact same time. So it sounds like, in other words, some of you that see a rabbit cannot see a duck until you kind of shift out of your mind and then refocus and say, oh, okay, now I see the rabbit or now I see the duck. So that's the same thing with Farmer Bill. Is it a dude or is it a bill like a statute trying to get passed in a House of Representatives or, House of Representatives? They mean 2 entirely different things. Let's look at another one. There's a really good one. Hold on. This is like my favorite one. Okay. Look at this one. Over here. Got your attention right there. Okay. How many of you see an older lady? How many of you see a younger lady? How many of you see that younger lady cannot see the older lady? And you're like, dude, I cannot see her. Well, I'm not going to spoil it for you. You can stare at this video over and over until you get it. How many of you see the old lady cannot see the younger? So the reason I do this is these are kind of fun psychological picture games where your mind can focus in on one thing at a time. That's how ambiguity works in logic. There's at least 2 different meanings. Which one do you mean? Do you mean the old lady? Do you mean the young lady? Do you mean the rabbit? Do you mean the duck? So anytime you think of ambiguity, think of these pictures, and there's 2 possible ways to see something. And so in logic, we don't want ambiguity or vagueness. We want to be very clear. We want to know exactly what somebody means. And just for fun, here's another one. So how many of you see the faces? How many of you see the candle holder? How many of you see the tree? How many of you see the ape and the lion or the tiger? Isn't that cool? That's like, dude, when you're an artist and you're doing this, you're either a genius or you're smoking serious pot. I don't know. I don't know what to say. But how many of you see the young lady's face here? How many of you see the dude playing the saxophone? Okay, so enough of that. That's called the Gestalt shift. It helps me to convey to you what ambiguity is, at least 2 different things being seen, or in here in logic, at least 2 different things being understood. Okay, so we're moving on. I beat that to death, and I hope you understand it more. It's ambiguous. 7. The intension of a term consists of, and this is the last time I'll refer to the book, but going to bring you to, oh, I'm going to bring you to a picture that's worth 1,000 words in your reading, whether you're using MindTap book or you're using the actual book. It is on this page, 93. Might be a different number in your MindTap, no matter what. It is this picture, okay? It's the same. Inventor, it's a term. It's connoting and it's denoting at the exact same time. If it connotes, it's doing this, which refers to intention or its attributes or properties, right? If it denotes, it's referring to extension or these names or things that you can point to in the world. What I like to say is if it's connoting, you could describe this to somebody and say, close your eyes for a minute. Let's say somebody's blind and they don't know what a cat is. They've never touched a cat. So let's say instead of the word inventor, we use the word cat. And let's say you describe it to somebody connoting. You're going to describe to them their properties and attributes of a cat. You're going to say, look, it's furry, it has 4 legs, it has claws, it meows, it has pointed ears. So you're putting those kind of properties or attributes are in here. Or you could denote and say, and you could point to a cat. Now, if it's not going to work if somebody's blind, right? But let's say they could see. Say, look, there's a cat. His name, I used to have a cat named Weizen, bless his heart. He's in cat heaven now. I had him for 15 years. He was an amazing warrior cat. Weizen means wheat in German, and that was the color of him. He was a golden color. Anyways, I could point to my cat and say, there's Weizen, but I don't describe anything about my cat. I just point to him. Notice the difference. Which one gives you more detail when you're trying to describe a term or define a term? When you connote, when you give it its when you list its properties, attributes, or you're listing its intention. So anyways, that's a long drawn out example of how this chart could help you answer that. And what was it asking for? Intention. So is it describing its properties and attributes? Is it connoting? Yes. So now let's go over here. An intention of a term consists of the qualities or attributes that that term connotes. Is that right? Yes, it's C. Okay, so that means A, B, D, and E are all false. Again, go back to that chart. 8, which of the following are all connoted by the term novelist? Am I connoting or am I denoting? So now, if you could remember that picture that I showed you, switch out the term that we're using there, inventor, and we're using inventor, and then we're using cat. Now we're using novelist. So if we go to the right side and we connote, what are we doing? Properties and attributes. Who could give me the properties and attributes of a novelist? What are they? Yes, C. Who got C? Good for you. Okay, you're describing what it means to be a novelist. You're giving them properties and attributes. So somebody could literally close their eyes and you could say, hey man, what the hey is a novelist? You could say somebody who's creative, somebody who's uh, literary, they're imaginative, they have to think with their right brain and give us good stories. 9, denotation means roughly the same thing as, I said I wouldn't do this, but I will go back to that chart. Denotation roughly means the same thing as, denotation, I'm trying to hint to you, means the same thing as, who got extension? Hey, extension, just go back to that chart. So that little picture right there can answer probably 4 to 6 possible questions in your exam, okay? All right, 10. Which of the following are all denoted by the term novelist? Denoted. Is it connoting going to the right on that chart? Is it denoting going to the left? If it's denoting going to the left, is he giving specific names? Yes, he is for inventor. So could you give me specific names for novelist? If you could, what would be those specific names? So how many of you got A? You saw Moby Dick and you just jumped right at it. Well, it's not A because the Scarlet Letter is the name of a book, not a novelist. So you have to be consistent. Melville, Hawthorne, and Mitchell are all names of authors. My favorite author ever on the planet in the history of the world is Dostoevsky. Oh my gosh, I love that guy. You don't know who he is? Read The Brothers Karamazov. If that's too heavy for you, read Crime and Punishment first. A lot of people in high school had to read that novel, Dostoevsky. mind-blowing genius. Okay, so we're moving on. Denoted, novelist, you're doing specific names. We got a list of names. B. 11. So this one, I'm not going to go into depth. Just going to pause for a second, let you have time to answer this. E. Words mean different things to different people. So conventional connotation deals with the problem of, and what are we doing when we connote? We're giving properties and attributes, right? Connoting. So you can give a lot of properties and attributes to a certain word or term that we're trying to define. Well, it could mean different things for different people. So the reason that we're using connotation is we're trying to get very specific on what we mean when we say inventor or cat or novelist. We're getting very precise and we're giving you multiple properties and attributes. So that's what connotation does. It deals with the problem of, different meanings, okay? It helps to make it more precise. 12. Which of the following pairs of terms have the same extension? We could point to these, and they're referring to the same. Neil Armstrong was the first man on the moon. So it's E. Go back and look at the section of the book. 13. The term currently living dinosaur has, this is tricky. Do we have any currently living dinosaurs? No, they're all dead, right? By the way, I have two cousins who dig up dinosaurs. They're both in North Dakota. Pretty awesome. Maybe later at a later time I'll show you examples of these cousins and what they do. But okay, currently living dinosaur has empty extension. Empty extension means they don't exist, so you can't point to it out there. You can point to a dead dinosaur, but certainly not to a living dinosaur. So, and by the way, yeah, that last answer, conventional connotation, you can look at, how I got that. But empty extension, you can look here. So things like Harry Potter, gnomes, elves, dragons. Oh, dragons, baby. From Game of Thrones, you know what I'm saying? There you go. So if something doesn't exist and it's make-believe, it has empty extension. If it once existed but doesn't exist anymore, just like dinosaurs, has empty extension. At one time it had extension, empty extension. At one time it had extension. You could literally point to a living dinosaur if you were alive when they existed. But as soon as all of them died, they're no longer there, so you can't point to them. You can just point to their fossils or bones. 14. Which of the following groups of terms is in the order of decreasing extension? So this one, you want a picture worth 1,000 words? Here it is. This one right here is probably, so in the book, page 95, and MindTap might be on a different page, might be the same one. What was it? It was decreasing extension. Decreasing extension. He gives you an example. He starts with animal, goes to tiger. So how to memorize this or how to get this is decreasing extension is the same as increasing intention. What you do is you start with something very broad. There's more of it in reality. So there's more animals in the world than there are tigers, let's say. There's more of it, right? As you start stripping down less of it in the world, you start increasing its properties and attributes. So I have an animal, and then I have a mammal animal, something that's warm-blooded. Then I have a feline mammal animal, something that's warm-blooded, and that's, in the class of feline. Then we add another property to feline, we have a tiger. So we have a tiger, feline, mammal, animal. We've taken something that we have more of in the world, and we have less of it in the world. So as we get really specific with our properties and attributes, we decrease it in the world. We have less tigers in the world. So we could have fish down here. We could have apes. We could have parrots, all kinds of different examples. You start with something very basic. You get to something very specific. And you're decreasing the extension. In other words, you start with something more of it in reality and you end up with less in reality. So what if we were to increase extension? It means we start with something less in reality, like tigers. There's less tigers in the world than there are animals. And then we start stripping away properties and attributes. We don't have a tiger anymore. Now we have a feline. Now we don't have a feline anymore. We just have a mammal, now an animal. So anyways, look at this chart. It will answer at least 4 different possible. So on this one, it was D. Okay. We start with something very basic, more of it in reality. We have more fish in reality than we do albacore, and then we have ocean fish, then tuna. So I'm getting less specific, and I'm ending with more specific when I decrease my extension. What about 15? I'm decreasing my intension. So when I decrease my intention, I'm starting with something very specific, and I'm taking off properties and attributes, and I'm ending with something not as specific. So I'm starting with a very specific tiger, and I'm ending up with a a less specific animal. So follow this kind of pattern. I start with something less in reality, end up with more of it in reality. So we go down to here. So I'm looking for something highly specific. Daisy, oh, that might be the winner. Maybe not. So, yeah. Decreasing intention. Yes, so that's right. This was a typo. I remember this. So it should be A. So I had to fix my typo from a previous. So decreasing extension, if you look here, sorry. Decreasing intention, sorry. I start with something very specific and I end up with something less specific. So I'm looking for something very specific out of the list. And what do I have? Daisy. It is the most specific thing in all of this, right? So it's the only candidate we have. Then I take off a daisy and end up with a flower, take off the flower, end up with a plant, take off the plant, end up with a living thing. So let's say fixed the typo. What about in the definition, mandolin means a 12-string lute. The words 12-string lute is and this is getting into a different part of your chapter now. This is D, definiends. So the definiends is the thing doing the describing of the definiendum. So if you don't know what those two are, go back to your book where that section was. In the definition, placid means tranquil. The word placid is the definiendum. It's the thing that's going to be described, and it's going to be described as tranquil. That's describing placid. So placid's the definiendum, tranquil's the definiends. Okay, super easy. These are easy giveaways. You just got to know the difference. You know what's the difference between definiendum, definiendum. Definiends, definiendum. Let's go to 18. The definition autocrat means a monarch ruling with unlimited authority is an example of. So I believe we're in section 2.3. I can go back and look real quick. Autocrat. So on this one's a little tricky because this one is C. It's a lexical definition. But usually, and I believe in my section on this, I tell you usually lexical definitions have multiple definitions that are sectioned out with semicolons or numbers, meaning one possible, then the second possible, third possible. This just happens to be the only definition of an autocrat. There isn't any others, so it's just the only definition it has. So it's lexical. Lexical just means, look, this is a definitional. Like, how many of you have the app Webster Dictionary on your phone? If you don't, it's a really good app to have. You just type in, and it gives you all possible meanings of the word autocrat. This is just one. But again, usually, and probably this is going to show up in your test, usually lexical has multiple meanings. It'll have semicolons, or it'll have a number that sets them aside, and I will show you from the book. So let's go down. There was that definiendum, definiend, stipulative, lexical. Yeah, see, here we are in lexical, section 2.3. and it's going to use the example of light. And notice light has 4 possible meanings. You could use a number or a semicolon to divide each one. Usually that's what you're going to see when you see lexical. So we'll go back. 19, the definition mind, quoted, means the region of the brain that manipulates symbols. Is an example of, think about it, push pause if you want, go back and look at the book or mind tap. And how many of you got theoretical? It is. So this is heavily philosophical or scientific. Go back to that section. Means there's never an exact answer. It's always theoretical. The best theory we have now on mind is, this. So it seems like some of these theoretical definitions, it's a war between philosophy and science. Sometimes they agree, sometimes they don't, but they're theoretical. As Hurley would say, they're never factual 100%. They're never all or nothing. They're subject to revision. That's how theory works in the scientific world or the philosophical world. When we have a better theory, it replaces the older theory. For example, early scientists used to believe that the entire, all the planets in the solar system revolved around the Earth, even the sun. That got turned up onto its head, and we realize now that everything does not revolve around the Earth. We revolve around the sun. So that's the biggest star in our solar system, that currently has a gravitational effect on all the planets. So the earlier theory about our universe was such that everybody believed it revolved around the Earth. The new theory is that we do not revolve around the Earth, except for the moon. So there you go. 20, the definition shacket means a jacket made of light material that buttons like a shirt. So this is E, stipulative, that you're basically combining 2 words for the first time. These are pretty fun. I had groups of my students break up in class one time, and I had them everybody make up stipulative definitions. My favorite was Tindos, tinted windows. Love it. Tindos, I got them. Who's got Tindos out there? You know what I'm saying? So it should be a super easy pick there. And the bottom line of section 2.3 is this. There should be, I believe it's 5. Stipulative, lexical, that's 2. 3, precising. 4, theoretical, and 5, persuasive. So there's 5 types of definitions. And that's pretty much what you're trying to figure out is, like, how does this definition work? So this definition works by combining 2 words. So like email, electronic mail. Okay, so there's a bunch. You can look in that section. 21. The definition of welfare means a handout made by the government to lazy people who refuse to work. It is an example of. How many of you got stipulative? Wrong. How many of you got lexical? Wrong. How many of you got persuasive? Right. So it's using emotive language to persuade you. Okay. In other words, it could be undermining your rational part of your brain. It's trying to get you to believe a certain way. So this author is trying to steer you to believe that welfare is something negative. Lazy people refuse to work. He's trying to use emotive language to persuade you. Okay, and that's not good. There's a time and place for that, but in logic, everybody's going to say no. It's best not to use persuasive definitions because they're not as precise. 22, the definition bright means having an intensity of at least 5,000 candle power. So this one, you can pause. I won't explain this, but this is just a precising definition, giving more precise information. What does precising definitions do? They eliminate vagueness. When you're very precise, you eliminate vagueness. Okay. 23. Kind of definition that assigns a meaning to a word indicating the attributes that the word connotes. And I think now we're in section 2.4. So you can look at this in your book or mind tap. It's D, an intentional definition. Definition rationalist means someone such as Descartes, Leibniz, Spinoza is an example of. So let's go to this section. So in this section 2.4, it gives you examples of extensional, or in parentheses denotative, and it gives you a few different examples of how these types can work. One way is demonstrative, where you can point for your finger with your finger. Enumerative, where you can look at subclasses. And there's another one. I skipped it. Hold on. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So demonstrative, enumerative, giving very specific names, and subclass giving less specific names. And the list might not be exhaustive, but it gives you a bunch of different names to describe tree, let's say. So in this section, I have 3 different types of how I can have an extensional definition. And I'm doing this for review because we're going to plow through some of these questions in a second here. And then intentional, once again, go to that chart back in 2.2. You know, that chart that was worth 1,000 words. On the right side, I connote, on the left side, I denote. And you could use novelist, you know, inventor, cat. We used a bunch of different examples. So this one, I have a few different ways to do this. Synonymous, etymological. Synonymous are one-worders. I'm using one word to describe. Etymological, usually these are italicized. They're in French or Latin, possibly Greek. And etymological just means where did it come from? Where was the birth of that word? And we have operational. These are describing the functionality of a term. What do I put here? Here, look for how something is functioning. Operational. Very specific language of how it's functioning. And then you have genus and species, or Hurley will say genus and difference. They're the same thing. This is definitely more complex. And you're looking for 3 things that stand out here. And again, this should be a review because in my video for 2.4, I definitely exhaust this for you. So you don't need to memorize this chart, but some of you have looked at it and it might help you. But now let's go. So for a review. Definition rationalist means somebody, I'm giving very specific names. You can actually point to them. And are they? Yes, they are enumerative definitions. So go back and look if you were stuck on that. 25, definition, gralis means talkative. The word talkative is C, definiens. This is kind of just a review. Again, this word is describing this word. And then the definiendum, what would that be? This, even though it's not asking you for that. So this is just another review of that previous section. So 26, this will be a little tricky. It's coming out of section 2.4. Celebrity means a person who is widely known. It looks like I have 3 things going on. A very specific person, and then I have something to describing this person that makes it specific. 3 things going on. You can look to that other video, or what I did is I drew a circle. On the outside of the circle, what would be the most broad? Yep, person. I could draw another circle inside of that circle. It's a type of person. Yep, celebrity. And what's the thing describing the celebrity? Widely known. So what is this? Yes, genus and difference, or genus and species. The reason I say genus and species, that's how I was taught by Aristotle. That's where this comes. He's making a distinction about reality using different categories of reality. But what's the difference? Widely known. What's the most general term? The genus, person. What's the most specific? The species, celebrity. So again, this will be the hardest of that whole section 2.4. But the thing you're looking for is at least 3 different things: genus, species, and the thing doing the describing of the genus to make it a specific type of person, which is the species, which is the widely known. So I'll give you an example. Some of you are still confused. I'll use toys. Legos, and something you stack on top of each other. So toy, Lego, something you stack on top of each other. Which one's the most general out of the things I just gave you? Toy, Lego, or things you stack on top of each other? Which is the most general, or the genus? Yeah, toy, right? Lego is a specific kind of toy, which is a species, and stacking on top of each other is the description that makes it a certain type of toy, which is a Lego. What other kind of toy can you have that's not a Lego? You can have all kinds. I mean, thousands of different toys, right? You can have, I don't know, some toy for a 1-year-old that talks to you, with, giving you your ABCs. So, just an example. 27. Definition: insect means a fly, wasp, ant, so on. Now, is it giving you very specific names? No, it's giving you general names to describe insect. When I do that, when Hurley does that, I give you very general names. It looks like I'm looking in the area of, yes, subclass. Definition by subclass. It means I'm going to define this, and in this section 2.4, there's at least 7 different ways for me to define this. I'm going to define what an insect means by giving you an example of an insect, by giving you a subclass. For example, an insect is like something like a fly, a wasp, an ant, or a beetle. I can go on and on and on. When I do that, I'm giving you a subclass, helping you understand what an insect is. I could give you a one-worder that's synonymous. I could give you a genus difference. I can give you a bunch of different things. But in this section, I'm doing it, or in this example, I'm doing it in a subclass way, so it's a subclass. 28. In the definition, newt means a semi-aquatic salamander. The word semi-aquatic is this one's a little hard for some of you. How many of you see 3 different things going on? This, and this. Okay? It's wanting to know what semi-aquatic is. So, are there 3 things? Yes. Is it most likely a genus species difference? Oh, yes, and they're all here as possible answers. It wants to know what semi-aquatic is. So we know we have a salamander. So think about that big circle. Is the salamander on the little circle inside, or is it on the outside? It's on the outside, salamander. What kind of salamander do I have? This little small circle on the inside, newt. And what's a newt? It's a specific type of salamander. It's the semi-aquatic. So what's the semi-aquatic doing? It's functioning as, or in this section, it's the difference. It's doing the describing. In other words, I could have multiple salamanders. In this example, I have a newt, which is a kind of salamander that's semi-aquatic. It just means it can go in and out of the water. Could I have another salamander? Yes, it could be whatever name, right? And it will have a different explanation, another difference maker. That might be fully aquatic or not aquatic at all. Okay, so go back. And again, you can see examples of this when you look at the species difference in genus right here, right? You can have different men. One kind of man you could have as a husband, and that kind of man is married. You could have another one that's a bachelor, that's unmarried. So, and again, in my video, I use circles to see this, and Hurley doesn't, but you can go either way. You have 3 things going on. So we're going to move to 29. The definition metrodome means an instrument used to mark rhythm. The word metrodome is, do I see 3 different things going on here? Yes, I see a description. I see something general, which could be the genus, and I see something specific, which could be the species. Is it? Oh, it is species. Okay, that's the species. And when you're in a test, how might you know that you're up against a species difference? Well, it might have all 3 terms as an answer: genus, species, difference. If I have all 3, maybe it is this kind of definition. So there you go. For example, connotation. And definiends, those are just distractors. So B and D here, those have nothing to do with the answer. 30. The definition anthropology is a word derived from Greek anthropos, meaning man, and logos, meaning word, reason, or account. Some of you might pronounce this logos or logos. It's Greek. There's no exact way to pronounce this. Greek, Attic Greek, and I've taken Attic Greek class in my dissertation level or my PhD level. And I learned from my professor who knew 3 different Greek dialects. He knew Attic Greek, he knew Common Greek, which is Greek today, and he knew Koine Greek from the Bible. So 3 different types of Greek. And he told me, yeah, some of these words, it's not exactly clear to pronounce them, but I'm sidetracking you. Bottom line is anthropology comes from Greek. It's italicized. And what was the giveaway? Remember how I was telling you? The etymological usually was italicized with Latin, French, or Greek, and there it is. So that's the giveaway. We know it's etymological, and that's just referring to the birth of the word, where it comes from. So it's, hey, etymological. Okay, you struggle with that, go back to that section. 31. Colossal means huge. Means huge. It's one word describing this word. What would that be? E. Synonymous. So use the best one word you got to describe that word. Okay, pretty easy. 32. In the definition, bridle means a headgear worn by a horse. The term headgear is, this one I'm just going to, you can pause if you struggle with this, see if you can get the answer. It is B, genus. Just means it's a very broad headgear. I could give you another headgear, bandana or helmet. Helmet. I used to use a helmet all the time when I drove my Harley. So headgear or helmet means a headgear worn by a motorcyclist. See what I'm saying? Just spinning the different genus, species, and difference here. So this answer was B. 33. A battery is dead if and only if a battery tester shows no deflection when connected to 2 poles. It's giving some functional operational language, which is very specific. And this is going to be, how many of you guessed it? C. Operational, using functional language. 34. The definition spoon means this and this and this. And by the way, this is the easiest one out of all of 2.4. It means you could literally point to it with your finger. Somebody's like, hey, what's a spoon? You literally take your finger and you point to an example of a spoon in real life. And that is D, demonstrative or ostensive. It means you could point to it, okay? 35. The lexical definition, the definition cup means a container for liquid. And I think we're in 2.5 right now. Criticized as too broad. That means if something's too broad, it means you're letting too much in. And you can go back to my video on this section. I really spell this out for you. But this is B, too broad. When something's too broad, you need to take off. You need to include less. So something's too broad and you want to make it more specific, you take off something. Yes, let's move on to 36. As a lexical definition, Winston Churchill's definition, a fanatic is one who can't change his mind and won't change the subject. Yes, that's right. So I think there's 8 lexical rules in 2.5, and you're having to apply these rules to get a good definition. And if any definition violates one of these lexical rules, then it will not make it into a dictionary. And this one, you can go back. This is C, figurative. And I forget the rule number, but we're going to go to that. Oh yeah, too broad, too narrow. It's rule 3. And by the way, we see this rule in another part of the chapter, but you can see it here as well. Circularity, figurative, where is that at? Yeah, right here, figurative. So rule 6, it has 4 different ways it can violate rule 6: figurative, obscure, vague, or ambiguous. Now, vague and ambiguous, those are easy. Those are 2 point, I believe it's section 2.1 in your book. And then figurative and obscure. So figurative gives you an examples. You might say like painting a picture or poetic. You don't know what the hell's going on when somebody says camel means a ship of the desert. You're like, what? It's figurative. And obscure means it's highly technical language and you're not exactly sure what is going on. So bunny means a mammalian of the family Leporide of the order of Lamorpha, who's, literally what? Yeah, you just lost me. That's very obscure, very technical. Whereas bunny just means rabbit, real easy to understand. So anyways, I'm just showing you an example of this rule has 4 different ways that it can be violated. And if it's figurative, it's usually poetic, and it's painting a picture instead of giving us the essential meaning. And that's what happens here. A fanatic is one who can't change his mind and won't change the subject. You're not really sure what you mean by fanatic because you're giving me a figurative example. And figurative doesn't pass that rule, which was rule 6. It should avoid these things. It doesn't avoid it, therefore it doesn't work. Okay, 37. As a lexical definition, Will Rogers' definition, a college professor is someone with a lot of big ideas that don't work. And you can push pause and look for this. It is effective. And I believe effective is rule 7. And look at this if you got confused. 38. Lexical definition. Metals, any substance that conducts electricity and retains its shape at room temperature may be criticized as. This one is B, too narrow. Too narrow means it doesn't let in enough. It means that it could also be not a metal. It could be something else that conducts electricity. It could be water. It could be a bunch of things. So it's too narrow. It needs to include more. So it violates rule 4 because of, oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, there, 3. That's what I meant, 3. Too narrow, too broad, violates rule 3. So on your test, you might see, too narrow, or you might see rule 3. It might show up 2 different ways. 39, lexical definition. The definition discrete means the condition of not being discrete may be criticized as, and here is the key word, not, negative. So basically, when you can describe something in the positive, you got to do it, versus describing it in the negative. If you have the choice of doing it in the positive, describing in the positive, that's when it's lexical. But when you have a chance of describing in the positive or the negative and you choose the negative instead, that's when you violate this rule. And rule 5 does give you a way out. It says, look, there are some things that are inherently negative. There's no other way to describe baldness except for not having or lacking hair. And that kind of sucks if you're bald. But there's no other positive way to describe baldness. You're lacking hair. So in that sense, you're not violating anything lexically. Okay, so he gives you an exception. Or darkness means the absence of light. How are you going to describe darkness unless you say there's no light? So these 2 do not violate the lexical rules. These 2 do. Let's go 40. Yeah, and we're at the end of my mock. So I like this one. As a lexical definition, the definition, a painter's easel is an easel used by a painter. Wow. You're literally you're describing this painter's easel with the exact same language. You're just reversing the terms. So you're describing it in a circle. Yes. So I believe this is rule, I think this is rule, Um, 4. So virtually of itself. So you have to break the circle and describe painter's easel in language that's not an easel used by a painter. So you have to describe it in independent language. That's how you break the circle and avoid that rule. So yes, I think the only thing missing here was the rule that talked about the context, and I'll just review that one with you, which is rule 8. So if you have a strike and you're talking about it meaning, in terms of baseball, but you're not including bowling or fishing, you're not including the context, you're violating the lexical rule. If something has more than one context, you literally have to say what context it's in. So that's just a review, a review of violating the rule of a lexical definition that doesn't pertain to the context. And he gives you a few examples. So that's pretty much an entire review of chapter 2. Okay. This is just a mock exam of different ways these concepts could jump out at you. But for now, that is pretty much it. So you can take your test, and hopefully this review helped you. And I would say that's it. Good luck in your test. Any other questions? Just let me know.